Hello. Hi there. Welcome to Guiding Voice podcast series, the Guiding Voice for a Better Future. This podcast is to help students, IT employees, entrepreneurs to shape their careers. Dear listeners, in every episode, we interact with industry experts or academicians or coaches to drive some insightful conversations that will help our audience learn great things. Also, we share an interesting trivia or fun fact about the IT world towards the end. Thank you for tuning in. This is Naveen and I'm with my co-host Sudhakar. So today we are going to discuss the most relevant topic in the current unprecedented pandemic times, which is post-COVID employment opportunities. And we are pleased to welcome Samir to our show today.
Samir Nagarajan is currently serving as Global President Human Resources with Cadila Pharma. This interaction will be based on his overall professional industry experience spanning over 3 decades with prominent brands like Stanford Seed, Dabur, Unilever Sri Lanka, AstraZeneca, Hindustan Lever Limited, Microland, and Novartis. Samir has a proven track record in strategic business partnering to deliver organizational outcomes. He is driven by a passion for people and performance and particularly interested in organizational efficiency and talent management. Samir's specific areas of interest include personal growth, leadership development, learning, and employee relations. He has wide intercultural experiences spanning Asia, Europe, Africa, and the North America. Samir, welcome to our show. Let's get started.
Well, thank you, Sudhakar and Naveen. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you today. A delight to be talking to your audience as well.
Samir, can we briefly talk about your career journey? It would be great to know how you rose up to the rank of Global HR Head and President at a major pharmaceutical giant.
I can tell you the steps that I took, I think, and then a little bit about the concept or the philosophy behind it. I think after completing my BCom, I did an MBA in HR from XLRI Jamshedpur, and I started my career with Hindustan Sivagaigi. And then actually did a brief stint with a computer company called Microland, where I basically did a lot of hiring. After a year of hiring experience, what is now called talent acquisition, I joined A.F. Ferguson and Company as a consultant. That was when I started really kind of spreading my wings. So I did consulting work in HR, IT, market research, systems, and in parts of India as well as in the Middle East. And it was a terrific experience because I worked a lot with CXOs and CEOs of various companies and learned, what top management perspective on HR and business is like. At that time, I took stock of where I was in my career after 4 years and decided that my long-term ambition was to head HR in a manufacturing environment. So that was when I joined Hindustan Lever. And I think, it was always a dream of any HR professional to join a company like Levers. It was my dream as well. And in the space of the next 7 years, I did 5 roles, starting from a factory HR manager and then a head office role in employee relations and then HR. I was the first HR manager for the foods businesses of Levers. And then I headed HR for a bunch of factories in Daman and Silvassa. And then I was head of HR for Modern Foods, which was a business acquired by the government of India. From the government of India, and gave me a lot of M&A experience. Then I quit Levers and set up HR for a building materials company called BPB, India Gypsum Limited. It was terrific exposure in terms of actually setting up the function from scratch. Did a brief stint with AstraZeneca after that and then rejoined Levers as head of employee relations, managing industrial relations for 35 factories, about 10,000 blue-collar workforce, contract labor, led a team of about 100 HR professionals at different levels. And I think I must have done something right because they sent me off to Switzerland after 4.5 years to be HR director for the global supply chain. That was the start of my international experience about 10 years back. I did the role in Switzerland. I was based in Switzerland, but I was doing HR across entities in Europe and Asia and the US. Came back, then moved to Unilever Sri Lanka as director HR for Unilever Sri Lanka. Then quit Levers and joined Dabur as head of HR for the international business based in Dubai. Then was a consultant with Stanford Seed, which is basically pro bono work, working with Harvard, Stanford's, the SMEs and family managed companies that they support as part of their entrepreneurship development program in India and Africa, and then joined Cadila Pharma as global president of HR. And I think some of the things I've learned along the way, I think one thing that stood me in very good stead was that at an early age, towards the end of my Ferguson stint, which was now about 25 years back, I set myself a goal. And I said I wanted to head HR in a manufacturing environment, and I worked towards it. And I think that's the first thing, which is that you need to have a long-term goal in mind and be clear about what it is you want to achieve by the time your career is, at its peak. The second is, of course, to be flexible about how you get there. It took a variety of steps, and it took sometimes I seem to be moving sideways and not necessarily forward. But I think as long as there is a design and as long as there is a plan and you can see the plan, I think you get there. And the third is, of course, to be open to a variety of experiences. I think one of the things that worked very well for me was that I was open to roles in different corners of India. I worked almost in every part of India. I was open to roles outside India, so I never said no. So when I got the option to go to Europe, I said yes. When I got the option to go to Sri Lanka, I said yes. Come to Dubai, I said yes. I think that yes counts for a lot because it gives you a variety of experiences and a variety of new people and new challenges that you can count on to develop your own capabilities. And I think the ability to reflect and move forward with those capabilities over a period of time is really what helps you reach where you do. Let me also clarify that I think you are talking about a global role with Cadila. I think it's interesting. I see it as one more step in another series of challenges. And of course, this is a truly different kind of challenge, but very exciting. And that's what makes it meaningful for me. So that's how I reached here to answer your question.
Wow, that's the gamut of everything. HR, merger and acquisition, manufacturing, international experience.
Yeah.
Thank you for that summary, Samir. And I'm sure our audience are going to get benefited with this 3-point mantra. Set clear goals and race against them. Be flexible in your approach and be open to a variety of experiences. Thank you. So Samir, how do you view the current situation post-COVID? Meaning which sectors are going to get benefited and which will get impacted negatively, and how it is going to impact the overall employment in post-COVID era?
So, Sudhakar, at the outset, I have this little joke. Towards the end of 2020, a lot of people were feeling very optimistic and lighthearted and saying that, thank God 2020 is over. I can't wait for this year to get over and so on. And I would generally laugh to myself and I would ask, does the virus know that it's 31st December? And obviously the answer to that question is the virus does not know that it's 31st December. As far as the virus is concerned, there's an entire planet to occupy. I think, while I'm not diminishing the efforts of a lot of scientists and healthcare workers who have, I think, taken extraordinary risks and challenges in terms of managing the spread of the virus and containing it and helping people get better and also in developing a vaccine. I feel a little bit uncomfortable when people talk about post-COVID. I don't think we are still at the point where we can say post-COVID. We are still somewhere in the middle of COVID, hopefully towards the end. But I would still, at the outset, encourage you and all our listeners to continue to be ultra careful, whether it is masks or social distancing or washing and soaping your hands regularly or using sanitizers and so on. But that said, come to your question proper. I did, early on in the pandemic, sometime in April or May last year, I did an informal survey amongst 15 to 20 HR heads in the UAE or in the Middle East primarily. So the obvious qualifications, it was not a formally statistically validated survey. It was only in the UAE. It was restricted to certain industries in terms of FMCG and retail and so on. But there were some things that came out very, very clearly. I think one is in terms of industries that are doing well. Look at the industries that have thrived right through the pandemic or, have been relatively unaffected. I would not say, maybe you've not got to the extent of saying thrived, but relatively unaffected. I think online retail, education technology, which is companies like, Byju's and Akash in India, and of course across the world, I think Lynda, Skillshare and so on have done extraordinarily well. R&D work has not suffered at all. Pharma as an industry has been generally stable. I think while there are individual players that have been affected positively or negatively by the developments of the last 18 months, the industry as a whole is, I think, to a large extent thriving. And then online shopping. I think while I was in the UAE, the UAE, it was largely a market divided between 2 or 3 large online retail players. But in the last 18 months alone, there have been 2 new players very disruptive players who have emerged, two and most likely three that have emerged and have kind of begun disrupting the marketplace. So a lot of industries, if you ask me, are doing very well. I think some industries are definitely badly affected. I think brick and mortar retail, hospitality, I think all your classical kind of industries have been affected. Some of them, again, individual players have not always been affected badly because some have responded dramatically fast to issues of working from home, ensuring that they're keeping their employees well educated on matters of health, making sure that their customers are not impacted severely or negatively, and overall making sure that they are creating a better place to work on the whole. So if you look at it, I think a lot of industries are doing well. A lot of industries have been negatively affected. I don't think there's any room for complacency. Even the industries that I'm calling out as, industries that have not been badly affected or negatively affected, I think if they get complacent, there could be problems going ahead. But clearly, if you take an industry by industry view, I think there are those that are thriving and racing ahead. There are those that are in stasis and are not badly affected, not positively affected, are surviving and are waiting for things to get better. And of course, yes, there are those industries that have been badly affected, and there's really a question in terms of the staying power of those companies going forward. So I think you see all three around you, depending on how far you look.
Samir, those are wonderful insights. You spoke about various industries, sectors, and how COVID has impacted them. And in fact, you have brought a very valid point saying that 2020 is not an end to the pandemic. We may be in the middle of the pandemic. So you also spoke about work from home. Can we talk a little bit about the nature of work? Because today we are hearing about gig economy, remote work quite a lot. So what is your opinion on that?
Irrevocably changed, if you ask me. For the first issue, I think working from home has become a reality for most industries. I think, the underlying behavioral issues or attitudinal issues on working from home are several. I think on the part of employers, there are issues of trust that need to be resolved. Do you really trust people enough to have them work from home and to give off their best? I think in terms of equipping employees to work from home, which is not just the software, but also the hardware in terms of, the kind of chair you use, the kind of table you have, the kind of, how sound insulated your environment is. I think the concept of being able to work in an uninterrupted manner from home, which in some of our more crowded cities and urban metropolises like Bombay and Delhi, for example, can be a real challenge in terms of how you work from home. I think I would add to that, if you layer it at another level, at an organizational level, working from home is actually a great way of enhancing diversity and inclusion. Because if you look at workplaces, our workplaces, physical workplaces, have not always kept pace with the times. And I'm speaking in a very general kind of way. Of course, there are industries and individual players who are very, very much with the times. And you keep hearing about the Googles and Cadila Pharmas and Microsofts of the world. But there are several others who are not probably as advanced as we are. And rather than investing heavily in upgrading workplaces now, there's quite a possibility that because people can work from home, and therefore to that extent the organizational investment in physical upgrade is not to that extent required. The third huge benefit I see is that with people working from home, organizations can realize savings on space. And again, in the same crowded metropolises, if you can save 50% of your office space, then that is hard cash that you're saving, which you can reinvest in the business. And I think from a business's point of view, there is no going back. I think organizations that have figured out the trick in terms of how to make working from home work are really going to be financially at an edge ahead, and will realize that working from home means real money placed on the table and available to the business. Gig economy, I think concepts in terms of work are going to change dramatically, because one of the big things I've seen in the last 15 to 18 months is that, earlier in India, there used to be a sense of shame around saying that you've lost your job. It was considered almost automatically assumed that there's something wrong with you, therefore you lost your job. That has undergone a sea change. I think in the last 18 months, the number of people I've seen, or in the last 15 months, who will simply stand up and say, I lost my job because of COVID. Can you help? And this is not just in face-to-face conversations, it's also across social media. Look at LinkedIn with its tag of, you can choose to say that you're open to work, which is basically just a polite way of saying that you've lost your job and you are in desperate need of another one. Or even the number of people who are posting saying that we need help and can you please offer it to us? I see that as an encouraging sign because it means that there's a certain amount of stigma and gossip and rumor that we are dropping around the entire tag of losing your job. Because let's face it, you don't always lose a job. In fact, most of the time you don't lose a job because there's something wrong with you. It's simply a mismatch between organizational needs and individual aspirations, or in this case, that the economy has gone bottom up and therefore you're without a job. So I think, yes, we're going to see more of gig economy. We're going to see more of temporary work. We're going to see more of contractual work at all levels. And therefore, a reorientation of ecosystem, economic, socio-economic ecosystem in terms of what employment means. Even before COVID, there was, research had shown that in the current generation entering the workforce, they would have 3 or 4 careers in a lifetime, not just jobs, but careers. And I think that process is only going to get accentuated. Finally, I think even at the meta country level, there's going to be a reorientation of how work happens in an international sense. Because, for example, one of the countries in the Middle East has basically announced a policy saying that if you can prove that you are working from home anywhere in the world, and proof means what? You get a letter from your employer saying that you're entitled to work from home, and with a certain minimum salary, you can get a visa to live in this country on a work from home basis. Now, what does this mean for taxation? What does this mean for citizenship? What does this mean for investments? These are questions that I think countries as a whole will also need to grapple with going forward. So you can see that there's a challenge in the nature of work that's going to emerge and erupt at every level. It's going to erupt at the level of the individual, at the level of organizations, at the level of companies, and at the level of countries as a whole. So I think, yes, to come back to my starting point, the nature of work has changed irrevocably. It's never going to go back to the start.
All right, Samir, you also touched about diversity and inclusion, which is very, very sensitive, right? So it will help us in bringing the right balance in the current arena. So what is your opinion about that?
Well, I think, I would make a couple of qualifying comments there. I think if you look at India as a country, we are by nature diverse and we are by nature inclusive. We have never had to, we have never dealt with the situation of being unitary as other countries have or as other economies have. Whether you look at region, language, religion, ethnicity, gender, we have always been diverse, and that is, I think, never going to change. I think it's only going to remain as substantial going forward. What has changed, I think, is that the overall regulatory climate, the legislative climate has changed with for example, the ruling from the Supreme Court on Section 377, for example, or the earlier rulings from the Supreme Court in the case of Vishakha, which actually set the groundwork for, I think, gender diversity and inclusion across the country. So I think largely it is a reality that we are diverse, and I think organizations will move forward rapidly in terms of keeping pace with changes in the external environment. I think sometimes organizations need that little bit of encouragement to move things forward and to make sure that they're more diverse and inclusive, and I see that no change in that. I think that will continue.
Absolutely, it does. Because this diversity and inclusion as an initiative is being driven across the organizations, across the globe. So India definitely brings in that inbuilt diversified culture, ethnicity and backgrounds that you talked about. And not to forget the language, because along with language, you come with your own perceptions and perspectives.
Yeah.
So Samir, moving on, what should the job aspirants do differently to be employable in near future, like couple of years, 2022, 23, and how can they stay relevant?
What do they need to do in order to be employable, and how can they stay relevant? I think it's more in terms of skills and capabilities. That cannot change. I think there's going to be a need to keep acquiring skills and capabilities. And I'm reminded of not so long back, I think 15, 20 years back, if you had a career and a set of skills that you thought were made you employable, you could simply continue with that over a period of time, in fact, for a lifetime. But I think the implication of having changes in the nature of work and the nature of employment over a period of time is that you will see that people will have to keep renewing their skills and capabilities and acquiring new skills and capabilities every few years. And I think that is what is going to keep them employable over a lifetime.
Sure, thank you. Samir, with every challenge, there will be some opportunities as well. So in this VUCA world, what should the companies, including the startups or entrepreneurs, focus on to attract the right talent?
Yeah, I think the question is, in terms of the employer brand, what your brand means to employees and candidates, and the the employment value proposition, I think those will undergo significant changes because we've got a generation that has, been through a very life-changing kind of event. And as I said, the nature of work is getting completely reoriented at different levels. So I think the reasons for people to work is going to be very different. And I think organizations will therefore need to come to grips with what is it that people are looking out for. Why does someone want to work with you? And the answers today are not going to be the same as they were 24 months back. And based on that, I think in terms of changing the employee value proposition and communicating that more effectively across a variety of media, across a whole lot of, reliance on non-face-to-face and non-personal contact methods are things really that we will need to do in terms of making it happen. Yeah, Sudhakar, does that answer your question?
So Samir, one final question for today's episode. What is your one piece of advice to those who are aspiring to make big in their careers?
Oh, I always say follow your passion. Do what you think really makes you happy. The recognition, the making it big, all those are titles. Those are, frills that the world gives you. It's not what you give yourself. At the end of the day, you should do what makes you happy and chase what gives you satisfaction. As long as you're doing that, you're on the right path. That would be my single word of advice, right?
Wow, that is really profound. Thank you, Samir. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great talk about post-COVID employment opportunities and in general, the overall opportunities for the job aspirants. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Naveen. Thank you, Sudhakar. It's been great talking to you. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks a lot.
Dear listeners, to know more about our speaker and the content, refer to the show notes and visit or follow us on social media. We are available on LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta, Twitter, Pinterest, and also on YouTube. Just search for The Guiding Voice and then follow, like, subscribe to us and also share within your network. In addition, please feel free to email us at The Guiding Voice for You. That is THEGUIDING VOICE 4 as a digit, U as a letter at gmail.com or WhatsApp us on India number 9494587187. That is India number 9494587187 and we will be happy to collaborate with you.
Hey Sudhakar, can you talk about the exciting opportunity of featuring our audience on this show?
Sure, Naveen. So guys, of late, we have been receiving a lot of career guidance related questions from our regular listeners through YouTube, LinkedIn comments, WhatsApp and email. And we are responding to them on one-on-one basis. Now, we are pleased to open up a new mode of interacting with you all while providing a chance to broadcast yourself. If you have any questions related to education, career guidance, or a specific IT function, just send your voice message through speakpipe.com/theguidingvoice. We will play your question in your own voice along with the answer either from us or our expert panel in our future episodes. Hope you will utilize this wonderful opportunity.
Alright, so it brings us to the trivia segment of today's episode. And today's trivia is about a company called Xerox. The first thing that comes to our mind when we come across Xerox is a photocopy. Because everybody knows that it is a company that manufactures photocopy machines. And Xerox and photocopy words have become synonymous. That's how popular Xerox company is. But there is the least known fact about Xerox. They're pioneers in technology implementation and they have done a lot of research with regard to personal computer, GUI, the graphical user interface, handheld mouse and Ethernet. All these technologies were first built at Xerox Corporation. Interesting, isn't it? Thank you for listening. There is more in store, folks. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful time. Take care. Be safe. Until next time, bye-bye. And we are signing off.